Alright, so new One D&D Unearthed Arcana just dropped, and the two character classes we're getting this one are the Druid and the Paladin. And let me just tell you, there are some very big changes in this one. So let's just dive into it. In this video, I want to cover the Druid, which I think is probably the class that has been changed the most, and in my opinion, not entirely for the better. But let's see as we dive into it. As I've done in previous videos, I'm gonna keep the new Unearthed Arcana open over here on the left, and I'm gonna be referencing the 5e Druid over here on the right, so we can sort of compare them as we go along, and I'm gonna focus on what I think are the bigger changes. So right away we're gonna notice here on the Druid class feature overview that we are gonna get something called Channel Nature, and we can also see that quite a few of the abilities have been sort of shifted around. When are we getting what? Wild Shape is gone. I can reveal that that's down in Channel Nature, so that's a first level thing now. And we also have various new abilities in here. So going over it step by step is not really going to make a whole lot of sense. I'm just going to go down and dive into each individual feature. But before we do that, let's just take a quick look at the class features here. It's mostly unchanged, but one big change you're going to see is that light armor and shields are now the armor training, whereas before you had medium armor and shields, but you could not use things that were made of metal. That thing is gone, and now we're just going to get light armor and shields. I don't think this is a huge change. The weird restriction with metal was annoying, but it also made it so that medium armor wasn't really viable anyway, because the only medium armor that wasn't metal was as useless as a studded leather, or basically worse than studded leather. So for that reason, this isn't a change that actually affects things, it's just a lot cleaner. So I like it. Now, on to a more interesting thing, because most of this other stuff is the same or not very important. We have Channel Nature. So Channel Nature is basically Channel Divinity, but for Druids. I kind of assumed they would just get Channel Divinity, but they get Channel Nature. And the first Channel Nature thing you get is Wild Shape. You can use Channel Nature 2 times. You regain 1 expended use when you finish a short rest, and you regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So these are kind of quite spammable. I still haven't seen any restrictions on how often you can short rest. That may be in this document, but that means you can basically use these, almost all the time, I'd say, because if you use Wild Shape outside of combat, that is, in combat, of course, you will be more limited, but if you can sort of take a short rest between every encounter, these are pretty much spammable. The first Channel Nature we get is this Wild Shape Channel Nature, and it's a magic action, which allows you to take an animal shape, and we're going to dive into those further down. You are in that shape for a number of hours equal to your Druid level or half your Druid level, or until you use Wild Shape again, or until you are incapacitated or you die. You can also end it as a bonus action. And this, already here, we have some very big changes, because before you would use the feature twice, and then you regained expended use on a short or long rest. Now you regain 1 expended use, which is just weird, because can't you just take 2 short rests then? Well, I don't know. Anyways, but the bigger difference here, and we're going to scroll a bit away, is that before you will revert from your form if you fall unconscious, you drop to 0 hit points or you die. Unconscious being the very important word here, because incapacitated is not the same as unconscious. Unconscious is very hard condition to come into in 5e. It's basically sleeping or dying. So incapacitated is just being stunned, it's just being paralyzed. It's just, there's a ton of different features in 5e on monsters, on class features, on spells that will impose the incapacitated condition, and that would end the Druid's Wild Shape. So that's a big change as far as I see it. One important thing here is that you can still speak. You have your ability to speak while you are in your Wild Shape. Another thing that is also very important here is that you lose access to all your other features, such as the ability to cast spells. So it's not just spell casting that's going now, it's also your rage ability if you're a multi-class barbarian. It's also your other Druid features if you have those. You only retain your ability to speak, your personality, your memories, and your Wild Shape. For me, I'm not sure we needed this change. I'm not sure it makes the Druid more fun. I think it makes it less fun, because all of those sort of wonky, maybe, multi-class features are out the window now. I think there were ways that we could sort of make room for a raging bear Druid, because I think that's a fun visual, that's a fun type of character to explore, while still not enabling a monk Druid with incredible AC, stuff like that, maybe that were abusable. So I think there's a middle ground here, and I'm not sure that I like that they lose all their features. although it is of course easier to balance stuff when you do that. Another important note here is that we actually have a design note from the designers where they sort of talk about why they've moved away from the proficiency bonus. I like these design notes. I want there to be more of them. It's really good to know their thought process. And the thought process here was what everyone was saying. Multiclassing is broken if you tie everything to a proficiency bonus and you give out those features at first level, because that means you will scale in that class even if you only take that single level. So now class features are going to scale with levels in the class more often, and I think that's a very good change. I like that they specified here, and it just makes a lot of sense, basically. So I really like that change, and I like that they take the time to put a note here for it. Now I'm going to skip past Druidic. I'm going to skip past spellcasting. It's more or less what you would come to expect. As with the other One D&D classes we've seen, it's prepared spellcasting as it was before, and you have this assigned spell slots, more or less, where you have to prepare a number of spells for the number of spell slots that you have for each level. So it's slightly nerfed in terms of versatility, but not overly so for the Druid. It's not a huge change for the Druid and how you play it, as far as I see it, but it is a nerf. At second level, you get something called Nature's Aid, which is basically just 2 new ways to use your channel divinity, or your channel nature, sorry. One of them is Healing Blossoms. As a magic action, you channel healing energy. You choose a point within 30 feet of yourself, and spectral flowers appears for a moment in a 10-foot radius sphere, and then you roll a number of d4s equal to your wisdom modifier. So that's maybe 3d4 at first level or second level. You add those dice together, and the total is the number of hit points you can distribute to creatures in that sphere. It's a mild, sort of weak heal. As an action in combat, it's not going to be great. Outside of combat, it's going to be fine. You can spam it because you have short rest spam, so you can just short rest a lot. I don't need it. I didn't need this. I think giving the cleric a heal on channel divinity is great, but I don't think I need the druid to have a heal on their channel nature. I think I'd much rather they have something that dealt with poison or had some sort of more naturey influence than just basically healing that we call blossoms. So now it's nature. I don't know. I don't particularly enjoy the flavor of this. I don't mind the feature at all. It's not overly powerful or anything, so it's just meh, in my opinion. Wild Companion, you can take a magic action, you can use the Find Familiar spell, and when you do so, the familiar is a fey creature and it disappears when you finish a long rest. So the Find Familiar change is obviously undergoing some changes. It's also underlined here, which means it's changed. We can take a look at that later. For now, I think it makes sense for the druid to be able to summon a Wild Companion, so it's not a feature I hate. I also think it's a feature we actually saw in Tasha's. Yeah, it's over here on the right, where you gain the ability to summon a spirit that assumes an animal form, find familiar, but it was a faint of a beast, blah, blah, blah. So it's more or less the same as the Tasha's optional druid feature we already saw, and that's a fine feature. Don't mind it, not at all. We'd have to see with the Find Familiar spell. Moving on, we have the subclass here, and then we are just going to scroll quickly down because, and I maybe didn't touch upon this enough, under the channel nature wild shape thing, which we are going to talk more about because this is the biggest change to the class, we saw that wild shape can only be done into an animal of the land, which is detailed in the wild shapes section later in this class's description. So animal of the land, those are going to come further down, but those are basically animals that walk on land. When we get to level 5, we get Might of the Land, where we can now take the multi-attack action, and we can now have a climb speed on a creature, which means no creatures with climb speed before level 5. Aquatic form, now we can get aquatic form, so that's creatures that have a swim speed, we will assume, and then at 9th level we're going to get those aerial forms. And if we compare that to the original druid, we're going to see that before you had beast shapes, you had second level, you could do a challenge rating 1/4, and you had no flying or swimming speed. You could do a climb speed. At 4th level, you had no flying speed, so you could do a swim speed. And at 8th level, you could do any creature with the maximum CR of 1. So in this case, we're going to get the aquatic form 3 levels later. We're going to get the climb speed 3 levels later, and we're going to get the aerial form 1 level later. And tiny critter, because you can only transform into a small to large creature with the new wild shape in this UA, so we don't get to transform into tiny critter before 11th level. And when you do so, you can't stay in that form for longer than 10 minutes, and your damage you deal in that form is halved. which is a very interesting choice. Again, we're going to talk more about the wild shape in just a minute. I just want to run through the overall changes before we really get into that. Then we have alternating forms at a 13th level, where you can switch between your wild shapes rapidly. You can switch your normal form as a bonus action, and you can then switch back into the wild shape form within the next minute as a bonus action. Neither switch expends a use of wild shape. So that's pretty cool. I'm going to shift back to my normal form. I'm going to shift into another creature on the next turn. So that really gives you a lot of versatility in combat. Depends, again, let's see the stat blocks for the wild shapes, but it also gives you a lot of versatility in terms of what are you going to need that wild shape for. You were flying through the forest as a bird, and now you need to become a dog. You can turn into a dog. You don't have to expend a new use of wild shape. So that makes a lot of sense. I think that's a good feature to have. It's slightly late, maybe. I don't know if it has to be a 13 level, but all right. Wild Resurgence, when you use your wild shape, primal magic radiates from you, allowing you to use healing blossoms as part of the same use of channel nature. That's just okay. So maybe 5d4 healing, which is on average 12 points of healing when you wild shape. Not gonna do a whole lot at 15 level, I feel. And then beast spells at 17 level, you can perform somatic and verbal components, and you don't need to provide free material components, and you can cast your spells. So you're basically a spellcaster in your beast form. If we look ahead, that was an 18th level feature before, so it's one level earlier. No big surprise here, and not anything that I'm offended by either. Archdruid, which was 20 level before and gave you a wild shape unlimited number of times, which was broken. We now have, whenever you roll initiative, you regain one use of your channel nature, and in addition to primal magic, the wheel causes you to age more slowly. For every 10 years that pass, your body only ages 1 year. So that's the timeless body thing, by the way, that they've just moved that into the same feature, and that's fine as well. As for rolling initiative, you regain one use of channel nature. I sort of hate that they're doing the roll initiative, regain one, because you have a heal tied to that channel nature. When do you roll initiative? Do you roll initiative if you're play fighting with another character in the party? Could you just go, let's say, have a slapping contest and then get to re-roll initiative endlessly, and then you gain your heal back every time? It's just it's a mechanic that can be very easily abused, and I don't think it's necessary either. I would rather they just had infinite wild shapes, actually, as they did before, but that's because I know that the wild shapes they're going to get are not going to be great. But before we dive into the wild shape, let's just take the epic boon here, where we have an ability score increase. This is a new thing, where you choose one of your ability scores, and you can raise that by 2, and you can raise it above 20. So that's a cool thing to get a level 20. That's something that's going to be worth it to go to level 24 in a class. And then you also get an epic boon on top of that. So I really like this in terms of the epic boons we saw earlier not being that great, not being something that I maybe go to level 24. But now we have this ability score increase that is really unique to the 20 level feature, because normally you wouldn't be able to raise an ability above 20. Now we get into wild shapes, and now we're also going to talk about wild shape. First off, I'll be first to say that wild shapes in 5e were broken. They were badly designed, maybe. They were fun, but they weren't that well designed. You had some really huge leaps in terms of power, especially for the Circle of the Moon Druid, which got more powerful wild shapes, where you would be hands down the most powerful melee martial character in the party at 2nd level with your, or 3rd level, whatever, with your Druid, because you got access to the bear and stuff like that. That just had more hit points and more damage than any other character in the party. Then you would probably fall off in terms of damage at higher levels, but you would still be able to infinitely wild shape, or wild shape a whole lot at least, so you could soak up damage really well when you were a moon druid. So basically you just got amazingly tanky, more tanky than probably any other character in the game with a druid, and especially with a moon druid. But the levels you sort of got those stuff that, like how it jumped from CR to CR, especially with the moon druid, really also make it so that some levels you weren't that strong, then you suddenly got very strong, then you got a little weak, and then you got very strong. So it's just all over the place. It was really wonky. It was really hard to balance for the DM, and it sort of just wasn't very well balanced or that well designed. Long story short, I think it's fine that we're going to go in and do something to sort of rein in the druid and rein in wild shape, but I don't like the way they've done it here. Basically, as they're saying here, you assume a form, you determine its appearance, you select an example animal from the form's description, and then you select, or you can select another appropriate animal, or you can choose a hybrid form. Whatever you do, you can sort of just decide, I'm that creature. When you choose an animal's appearance for a form, that animal needn't be the same size as the form. You could choose to be an elephant, but you could choose to be a small elephant, for example. So basically, the way Wild Shape works now, you're not choosing a stat block in the back of the monster manual or the player's handbook anymore. You're going in and you're getting a stat block, and then you choose what that stat block looks like, but it's going to be the same stat block. The only thing you really get to have a choice about is the size of the creature you're changing into. So Animal of the Land is the one you're going to get a second level, and it's the one you're going to be stuck with until you get Animal of the Sea at, was it 5th level? Let's just check. It was 7th level. So you're going to be stuck in the Animal of the Land form until 7th level. Now the Animal of the Land form has 10 plus your Wisdom modifier armor class, so that seems low, and it is low. It's going to be lower probably than your normal CR or your normal armor class, but it's also going to be higher than most of the creatures you could change into under the old rules, where you had to go in and pick a stat block, because there was really almost no creatures that didn't have like 12 AC or 13 AC. Beasts just have very low AC. So that's not a huge nerf in terms of AC, although it is pretty bad. The huge nerf we're going to see is going to come here over at hit points, where you continue to use your hit points and hit dice. No getting your creature's hit points on top of your hit points. No using them as temporary hit points, basically. You're stuck with your own hit points. So changing into an elephant when you have 1 hit point left, that elephant is going to have 1 hit point left. Now, do I think this is a good change in terms of balance? Certainly, because as everyone knows, it was broken that you could be at 1 hit point, turn into an elephant with, 84 hit points or 120, I have no idea. And then you could just soak up damage before you went down again. So this way, you share hit points between forms, and that of course makes it a non-tank option. Nothing changes in terms of your tank ability, except that your armor class is probably going to get worse. Moving on down, you get a faster move speed, so that is a benefit. You're up at 40 move speed, and when you're at 5th level, you get a climb speed as well, or you can get a climb speed, so that's also pretty nice. It's kind of weird to imagine an elephant climbing trees, but, well, who am I to judge? Then you have your strength and dex. Those are going to be equal to your wisdom score, and everything else is going to be the same. That, again, also makes sense. I think it's fine that they're going to do strength dex equal to wisdom score, because it's just going to say we're going to keep all that physical stuff the same. You're going to retain your con, because otherwise your hit points would also change, and that'll get really messy to sort of wonk around with. But it's also kind of boring to have your strength and dex be the same. So there's no difference in strength and dexterity. If you're a snake, if you're a panda, if you're a bear, if you're an elephant, you're going to be the most dexterous, nimble elephant the world has ever seen, as you're climbing through trees and jumping away from fireballs. For me, it just sort of ruins the immersion of being a different creature, that you can be an elephant that can walk a tightrope, for example. As the Wild Shape thing specifies that you lose your features, I'm assuming that you don't have your save proficiencies, but we can just go up again and really quickly check that out, because it's a very important distinction here. Do we get to use our saving throws? You retain your personal memories, ability to be right. You lose access to all your other features, as ability to cast spells. So I'm not seeing it. It's games just replace yours. So the way it's written, I'm going to assume that you lose your saving throws. So not only are you probably going to drop down in AC, keep your own hit points, you're also going to lose your saving throw proficiencies and your skill proficiencies. So this is not great. This is in fact pretty bad, because your saving throw proficiencies are obviously going to be very important. You have wisdom and intelligence. Those are very good saves to have. When you're a beast, you don't have those, at least how it's written. Now, one thing you do get is dark vision, so you don't have that from your character species, class, or race or species or whatever. You're going to get it here. As we know, Dungeons & Dragons, every species has dark vision basically, so it's not a huge thing, but it could be helpful for some druids, I guess. Languages are the same, and your proficiency bonus is the same. Then you get keen senses. So again, no matter what creature you are, you can be... I have no idea what a creature with bad perception is, but I know there are some. You can be one of those and you would still have keen senses. Then you have Bestial Strike, which is just basically a spell attack. And you get your spell attack modifier. Again, if you do all your features, you don't really have a spell attack modifier. You wouldn't at least be able to add proficiency to it. So it's, again, some wording things here. But what they're saying is that you would have your wisdom plus your proficiency, basically. Anyways, you deal 1d8 plus your wisdom modified bludgeoning, piercing, slashing damage. So that's a pretty middle of the road attack. And you can make one of those until you reach 5th level. Then you can make 2 of those. Now, it's not hard to see the issue they're trying to fix here. The issue was that everyone who's played a Druid knows you would have to have a folder with every single beast in the monster manual in it at the CRs appropriate for your level, and then you would have to ask your DM, has my Druid seen this creature? Have I seen a Velociraptor or a Tyrannosaurus Rex so I can change into that? Have I seen a giant ape? Have I seen this creature? Could I use this creature? Could be kind of clunky, it could slow down the game, and there were wild differences between stat blocks. Some beasts were just objectively way better than others, even at the same CR. So you would have some issues where it would just be bad choice for you not to pick the brown bear at when you were 3rd level moon druid and whatever. So the way they're going to do it now, the way they're trying to do it, is simply to give you some features that come on top of your own. So every form you have is basically the same. It's just you can envision that creature as you want to. Now, for me, there are some issues with this. First off, I don't mind that they're making the form less powerful. I kind of like the hit point change. I think you could argue that some temporary hit points would be appropriate in some cases. What I really, really dislike is the uniformity of it. We haven't looked at the aquatic or the animal of the sky yet, but I can reveal that the aquatic basically just can breathe air and water. It deals a bit less damage. It's slower on land. It has a good swim speed, longer dark vision, and the animal of the sky, even longer dark vision, a fly speed, which is of course great, lower AC and even lower damage, and then you get a flyby thingy where you don't provoke opportunity attacks. So these forms, these base stat blocks are just so bland, and what I'm trying to get at is, if you want to be a snake, wouldn't you want to be able to constrict or have a venomous bite? Or you're transforming into an ape, shouldn't you be a better climber than an elephant or a horse? Shouldn't you be faster when you're a horse than when you are an elephant? Just, I don't know how fast elephants are, maybe they're really fast, but another slow creature than a sloth. Shouldn't there be differences between your beasts? Again, I can understand not wanting the players to have to look up 500 beasts at the back of the book whenever they're trying to use their wild shape, but couldn't we have had like maybe 5 stat blocks for each? Just 5 base stat blocks where this is a sort of crawly, snaky creature, this is a sort of horsey, mammothy creature, this is a sort of 2-legged, apey-like creature. Would 5 stat blocks maybe cover it? I don't know. Another thing I could see, and this is probably the option I prefer, would be that you would have pick and choose features. You had that base stat block, which had the AC 10 plus your wisdom modifier, dark vision, whatever, Bestial Strike, and then you could say, okay, if you're small, you get 12 plus wisdom AC instead, but your damage goes down a bit. If you choose medium, you get that medium of the whole thing. You take large, your AC is 8 plus your wisdom, and your damage goes up a bit. Okay, so it's already different here. And then you could say when you grow in level as a druid, you can pick more additional features. So at first level, you get to pick 1 feature. So that could be keen senses. It could also be charge. It could also be constrict. It could also give them like 7 options or something. And then when you get higher level, you can say, okay, now you can add an additional feature to the features you can choose when you choose your animal form. So eventually you could maybe have 3 different features on your animal form. So whenever you turn into an animal, you get to choose, okay, I want to be able to constrict, I want to be able to climb, and I want to be able to breathe underwater. You're a sea snake or whatever. Or I want to be able to charge. I'm a rhino. I want to have tough skin so I get extra temporary hit points when I turn into a large creature. Just stuff like that, so you could sort of mix and match your own wild shape stat block is something I think would go a really, really long way. So for me, I get what they're trying to do. I think it's really, really bland. I don't think it's very good. I think it sort of makes it just unfun to play a druid the wild shapes. And again, I agree before, too strong, especially in the moon druid, way too strong. But this is just not fun. And I think they've nerfed it way too hard into the ground. You've gone from 2nd, 4th, and 8th level to 1st, 7th, and 9th level for these, and you're going to be weaker. And before we move on from Wild Shape to the Moon Druid subclass, so that's going to have some Wild Shape stuff in it too, let's also just talk about the tiny critter thing, which is gated at 11th level. That's the level you get to be tiny. Now, the issue they're fixing here, I think, is the one where the Druid would turn into a spider. They could do that very early on, and they could just climb through the castle to scout out every position of the guards. They can climb through keyholes to get into rooms in dungeon you wouldn't normally be able to go into. I sort of it makes sense why you would keep those features gated to a higher level than 1st level. I can actually understand that. I do think, however, that it would be fine to have it a bit earlier than 11th level, so that I could see that maybe moving down 5th, 7th, 9th level. 9th is still pretty late, I think. And I'm not sure I understand why they can't be in that form for 10 minutes longer. And I understand why it's halved in that form. Basically, for me, I think that climb speed, gate that is a 3rd level trait you can pick up for your Wild Shape when you Wild Shape, for example. Tiny, that's maybe a 5th level thing where you still have the same hit points, of course. You get an even better AC, but you deal like no damage at all. And maybe tiny should be restricted, so you're not going to be a beetle. You're restricted to tiny in terms of a rat or a creature like that can't necessarily climb through keyholes. And then you can have a circle of the insect or whatever kind of druid that could maybe turn into an insect, which would be, of course, even more useful in some cases at least. So I think, again, the way they've done this isn't great. And then you could also have huge... I'm not sure you can turn into a gargantuan creature with the normal druid. Well, there is no size limit, I think. No. So gating that at least huge creature, so it could be that Tyrannosaurus Rex, that would also be fine coming in the same level as tiny, so at level 5 maybe, level 7, I don't know. You get tiny, you get huge, and the huge creature, of course, has even worse AC maybe, and it gets a ton of extra temp hit points, and it gets even better damage, but it's also gonna have less other features and be less viable in other terms. So also to just get into that where you can sort of still use this in combat. It's not gonna be great. It's not gonna be better than the fighter or the paladin or the barbarian or whatever, but it's gonna be fine in a pinch where, okay, I'm all out of spell slots, now I'm gonna be an ape and I'm gonna go ape shit. Yeah, I could see that. I think that would just be a better solution overall, but if you have a different opinion, please let me know in the comments down below, because I think it's a very interesting thing they're doing here. They're just doing it in the least interesting way, in my opinion. All right, so before we end this video, and it's already gone on for far too long, I just want to take a look at the Circle of the Moon subclass. We all know the Circle of the Moon. I think if you've had a druid in your game, you've had a Circle of the Moon druid in your game, and that's also a very good reason why it deserves to be changed. I'm just trying to find it over here on the right, and we're gonna go all the way down here. Okay, great. So before you got Combat Wild Shape, you could turn as a bonus action, and you could regain hit points while you're in your Wild Shape by burning spell slots. And then the big thingy was that starting at second level, you can turn into a beast with a channel rating as high as 1. And from 6th level, it was your druid level divided by 3, rounded down. So it was just super powerful, especially at 2nd level when you got that brown bear Wild Shape form, because it was just so strong. And then around 4th, 5th level, it fell off. 6th level, boom, strong again, and so on. Then you had later Primal Strike, non-magical stuff, overcoming resistance, and then you got some even better circle forms, as just the same as up here, but you had Elemental Wild Shape as 10 level. That's another power boost right there, because those are chance rating 5 creatures, and then at 14 level, I'll also self at will. So how does the new 1D&D Druid compare? Well, Combat Wild Shape is still a thing. It comes in at 3rd level, because subclasses come in at 3rd level in 1D. You get to cast Abjuration spells while in your Wild Shape. It's just okay, I guess. We can cast Abjuration spells. Those would be your heals, I'm fairly certain, in 1D. Bark Skin, which has been changed, so it's probably useful now. But it's not a huge buff, at least for me. I don't see it being very great. You're still going to have to use your action probably to cast that abjuration spell. You're not going to have shield. It's not a primal spell. You could maybe pick it up, but I think shield is also going to be worse in 1D, or I hope it is. So I don't see this being a huge buff in terms of combat. It's going to be good, but it's not going to be great. Then we have Kick Attack, where you can use Unarmed Strike as a bonus action. Now, this seems weird because you have something called a Bestial Strike, but then you could use Unarmed Strike as a bonus action. So basically, Unarmed Strike, and we can just quickly jump down to it. In this UA is going to read... here we have it. Where you can deal some damage, or you can grapple, or you can shove. So when you use Unarmed Strike, you choose one of these effects, and the intention here is probably that grapple comes into it, so you have that constrict thing going on, or you have that shove charge thing going on with that Unarmed Strike when you are a Circle of the Moon Druid. You could also just use it to hit, so that's maybe using your hoofs if you're an elephant, I guess, is the purpose. I don't really love the way it's set up. I would just, again, going back to an idea where we have features we can pick, not a ton of features, doesn't have to be too complicated, just like 5, 7 features, 10 features we can mix and match. Then you could get to take an extra feature when you're a combat moon druid, whatever, Circle of the Moon Druid. Then we have Swift Transformation, where you get to use your Wild Shape as a bonus action, but no more than once per turn. That's also fine. That's good. That allows you to sort of turn into it in combat and not do it before combat. What I'm missing here is probably maybe some temporary hit points. Could be okay on it, but I'm also not hating that they're not making this Moon Druid a lot better than other Druid subclasses. We haven't seen those yet, obviously, but I do suspect this is going to fall off pretty heavily. Now again, Moon Druids deserved a nerf, a really big nerf as well, and this is a really big nerf, but I don't think it's very exciting. I'd rather see that they nerfed it, but made it more fun, kept it fun, saying, okay, you get some additional wild shape. You can add an extra feature. It's not going to be as strong as just turning into a creature that's 4 times as strong as the creature another druid can turn into, but just like slightly stronger, slightly more versatile. The wild shape is your thing, so you're going to be really good at it. Anyways, moving down elemental wild shape, you're going to get resistance to a form, and then you may have some stuff like fire on you, and you can deal damage of that type instead of your normal type. For me, this is sort of a way to come into that elemental wild shape without giving you elemental wild shape, but I don't see why the Circle of the Moon has anything to do with the elements beside it having it over here. For me, the Circle of the Moon were always more about the transformation, so I could more see it being like you're a humanoid hybrid rat, like werewolf creature or something, than an elemental creature. Wouldn't you have a Circle of the Elements where this would be the feature though they got? I don't know. For me, it just doesn't thematically make sense, but I think it's a fine feature. Getting resistance to one of these damage types of your choice is pretty strong, and you can deal fire damage, so you can go around magic resistance. That's great. No issue with that. Elemental Strike, so you're basically just going to deal an extra 1d6 damage of the type you choose from your Elemental Strike with each of your attacks. So that's 2d6 extra damage if you hit with both of your attacks in your Bestial Strike, your Wild Shape form. And this extra damage increases to 2d6 per attack when you reach 70 level. First off, this is a great feature. It's obviously really strong. This is what's going to make the Moon Druid stand out in terms of its combat prowess in battle with the current way the Wild Shapes are set up. So that's fine. But it's also kind of weird that the Ranger got a similar feature. We saw where they could only apply some bonus damage once per turn, and the Moon Druid just gets to go nuts. So it could do it 2 times per turn. I wish they would be consistent with these, and I wish they would do it so that's always on each attack, and it was just sort of some really hard limits on how many attacks you can make in combat. But we still have to see the monk and the fighter for how they're going to handle multiple attacks. Right now, this is a really strong feature, but I have no way of comparing it with other martial classes beyond the Paladin, which we see in this document as well. So yeah, it's not bad. It's not turning into an elemental either. You could say you're an elemental with these features, like because you get a lot of elemental stuff, but I think it was more fun just turning into an elemental. It felt more fun. This is going to be like, I'm going to turn into a Fury Elemental, and then I'll deal some extra damage and have fire resistance, whereas before it was like I turn into a Fire Elemental, and that was a thing. So maybe give the Moon Druid, if you want to stain this, give it an elemental form stat block, like you had an aerial form and an aquatic form and a land form, and then give that some features. I'd like that more, basically. And then lastly, we have 1,000 Forms, where you can cast Alter Self without expending spell slots, and it doesn't count against the number of spells you have prepared. Alter Self doesn't seem to be changed in this document. It's not underlined, so it's basically the same. It was always a not very useful feature, but you already didn't mind it that much because the Moon Druid was so broken. So yeah, it didn't really matter. I would like it to be better, different. I think it's a bit lazy just taking that feature because it was the least interesting part of the Moon Druid. So yeah, to summarize my overall thoughts on the Druid in One D&D is that they have certainly nerfed it. The Wild Shape has been nerfed to the ground, both in terms of versatility, in terms of what it can do for scouting purposes outside of combat for exploration, and also especially in terms of the Circle of the Moon Druid, what it can do in combat, where it's just not gonna feel the same, and that's a good thing. I say, for the most part, that they've nerfed the Moon Druid's combat versatility, but I also think that they have really not just massacred the Druid's power level, but they've massacred the fun of it. This just doesn't feel fun. Is it more balanced? Sure. Is it going to be smoother and easier for people to play at the table? Yes, definitely. It's not that hard to know what you're doing if this is your stat block. Everything else is gone. This is now your stat block. That's going to be easy. But it's just not fun. So please, Wizards of the Coast would be my suggestion. Go in, look at the Warlock, look at why everyone loves invocations, because you get to pick and choose some stuff, and you do the same for this Druid, for the Wild Shapes. Get to pick and choose. Doesn't have to be powerful, just has to be different. Just has to feel like you're making some choices. You get to do special things. You get to turn into a creature that fits the situation. It may not be great. It should never be as good as a martial character of the same level, but it should be there, and it should be interesting, and it should be a choice you make. Do you agree with me about the Druid, or do you disagree? Please let me know in the comments down below. I'll read all of them, and I try to respond as well. And I will probably, if I have time, dive into the Paladin, but I think that video is going to come tomorrow because it's pretty late here where I'm at. And yeah, these videos take some time to shoot and edit. So stay tuned for more information on the One D&D playtest. There is some very interesting stuff with the Paladin as well that I am excited to go into. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. You can like the video. You can also visit us at eventyrgames.com, or you can pick up our books at eventyrgames.store, or you can support us at patreon.com/eventyr. There will be links to all of that stuff in the description down below. And beyond that, there's not a whole lot left to say, except thank you so much for watching, and I hope that I'll see you in the next video.